Great. So welcome all to the Fulbright Lunch and Learn. Like I mentioned, you are more than welcome to keep your video off. We're going to record this and then we will post the session to the CLBR YouTube page. So if you can't stay the whole time, that's totally fine, because then you can check out the video shortly after we conclude this recording. I'll go ahead and post it on our YouTube page. This session is really meant to be a very baseline introduction to the Fulbright U.S. student program. So if you are a junior or a senior and you're considering the Fulbright, we're just going to go through briefly like what it is, how to plan for it, how to navigate the website so you are able to do research on your own time about the award, and how to consider which award type under the Fulbright is the best choice for you, and then a little bit about the application process using deadlines from the 2022 school year. My name is Shania Siren. If you haven't met me, I'm one of the assistant directors for the Center for Life Beyond Read. I'm also one of the Fulbright's program administrators. So most of the communications you'll see are coming from me about this award. Additionally, I also am the point person when it comes to advising. Although any one of our CLBR advisors are all trained on Fulbright, so whoever you may be working with now can also offer insight as you get started on the application process. So for Fulbright, like I mentioned, our agenda today is focused on going over what the award actually is, navigating the website, and brainstorming and advising a little bit. So I will take some time to ask that somebody from the audience talk a little bit about any country or program they're considering under the award, so we can do a little bit of mock advising, and then talk a little bit about the application process and timeline. Fortunately, we are very ahead of the timeline, so don't at all feel like you are behind. The whole point of this session today is to get you started for work that I'm going to recommend you start working on in the summer. So the Fulbright U.S. student program, it's a large program. There's over 140 countries that participate in this. And it provides opportunities for students who are interested in both professional and academic opportunities. Eligible college seniors and alumni can apply for this award. So juniors currently, you will be able to apply for this upcoming cycle. The application opens up in April, so don't feel like you are again behind at all. And then for current seniors, you remain eligible for the Fulbright until you've received a doctorate degree. So there's no age restriction. So you remain eligible for a while. And under the Fulbright, you can apply for funding for a graduate study. You can also propose to conduct research or do English teaching abroad. So the Fulbright is really an umbrella for 3 different types of awards, and we'll go over that a little bit. But the purpose of the Fulbright is to really focus on the value of mutual cross-cultural exchange. So a strong application will focus on the narrative of what you hope to contribute to that country, and also what learning you hope to get that can inform your future. And the Fulbright is a program that also offers funding for folks to study in the US. So on scale, there are hundreds of participants in this every year. And you really want to focus on considering, what country can you go to that's going to provide you the opportunity to get the most cultural insight and how that's going to connect to your future. For this award, you'll see here, and I'll break it down for you. The major awards, again, are going to be English teaching assistantships and grants for students to study, usually in like a 1-year master's degree, and then proposing a 1-year or 9-month research project. You'll find that in navigating the website, and we'll do that in a little bit, each country offers a combination of different types of awards. So not every country is going to have all 3 of these options. Some countries only do English teaching assistantships. Some do only study abroad or study programs and research projects. And each country is going to have a different number of available awards. So you want to pay attention to, when you're navigating the website and the country you're considering, what awards are available. And then in clicking on that award, you want to focus on the description, because each award is going to have a slightly different description. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And so each country is going to have a different sub requirement. So it's in considering the structure of the program, Fulbright is more the operating body of a bunch of different types of awards. And while the application process is the same, each country is going to be looking for a different type of candidate. So the English teaching assistantship in one country may be looking for students with a business background, while the English teaching assistantship in a different country may be looking for students with an arts background. So you do want to pay close attention to, even if you are eligible to apply for the English teaching assistantship, is that country looking for someone with your background and qualifications? Another requirement that you want to pay attention to is language requirements. Some countries have a soft, some have a hard requirement and quantifiable number of years of like background experience in a certain language. With the English teaching assistantship, it's good to think about some of the requirements and timeline for these processes so you can make the right decision for yourself. With the ETA, you apply directly to the Fulbright for the country you're choosing. And through the application process, they will place you at an institution. And you'll find when you're looking at that country's ETA description, it usually will outline what educational levels they're looking to place people at, but it varies from elementary to college. And it also varies in terms of like rural or urban settings. So some of the programs will ask you to provide your preference in your essays, some won't. So you do want to keep that in mind, that the Fulbright will place you and you don't always have complete autonomy over where you're placed. However, with the ETA, there's no previous teaching experience required generally. If you have tutoring experience, that's usually helpful. However, I've also seen students who were awarded who have experience either like coordinating events or other leadership activities on campus or off campus. So you don't have to want to become a teacher or professor to be qualified to do the ETA. There is no required letter of affiliation for this award, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But I put it there just to keep in mind that some of these awards are going to require not only applying to this Fulbright application directly, but also some external steps that you'll have to take that may take a little bit more time for you to get your application together. And so the ETA is the most direct application. You're applying directly to Fulbright, you're going to hand them all your materials, and through the review process, they will place you in a program if you are awarded. The supplemental project is pretty common for all of these award types, but for the ETA, you'll see it in almost any of the ETAs, where it's an external project that you will do outside of the classroom or sometimes at the institution. And this includes like you being responsible for organizing food groups or movie watching groups on campus or off campus. It could also sometimes look like volunteer or internship activities, something that's going to require you to do however many number of hours of work or engagement outside of your direct English teaching responsibilities. Some countries have really clear requirements for like what your supplemental project can look like. Some are more open-ended, some are required, some are preferred. So again, it really goes back to paying really close attention to what that country's ETA description is saying, because again, each one is slightly different. The open study is funding through Fulbright for you to select the country and program that you would like to attend for graduate study. So this provides a little bit more autonomy, which is nice. However, you would have to find an institutional affiliation, which means you are reaching out to the potential program that you would like to study at and looking to get it basically a letterhead written affiliation from the head of that program, or typically it could be also like the chair of the faculty, that essentially is agreeing that, if you are funded to do the Fulbright, they would welcome you. Again, looking at that country's open study page, you want to pay attention to the deadline. And so I mentioned earlier, some of these awards are going to require like an extra step, and this is one of them, where the institutional affiliation is on you to find somebody to accept and write that letter for you. It takes extra time. It's a little bit out of your control of whether or not people get back to you. And so some of the countries will require that affiliation is attached in your application by the national deadline. The national deadline is typically in October. So it being March, you could start that process now. However, sometimes countries won't require the affiliation until you've actually been like awarded the Fulbright. So that obviously gives you quite a bit more time. But this is sometimes a huge barrier for people in trying to get somebody to write that affiliation in time. So just keep that in the back of your mind. It is an extra step to this process. Again, some countries are going to have language requirements, and that varies depending on the program. Is the program taught in English? Is the program taught in that country's language? That usually will dictate whether or not there is a language requirement. And through the open study, you are applying to the Fulbright for essentially your scholarship or grant funding. And then through, you still have to submit an admissions application. So open study, you are having to submit 2 applications essentially. So you also want to keep that in mind, that this process is going to just be more time consuming than the ETA. Similarly, for the open research, it also is grant funding where you would propose a research project through your application and also find a lab or institution to host you as a researcher. So you also would have to get a letter of affiliation in the same way that you're seeking for one for the open study. You have to find a lab or institution to write you a letter of affiliation, usually by the national deadline or later if you're accepted as a Fulbright applicant. Again, language requirements vary. And all of these affiliations have to be written in English. So you do have to keep that in mind. So I have seen circumstances where a student received an affiliation and it was written in a different language, and you have to keep in mind that you may have to give yourself time to translate that and get permission to translate that into English, because Fulbright will not accept it if it's not in English. And then the 4th category, there are named awards. So we'll go over that a little bit, but essentially these are pre-existing relationships between a college and the Fulbright. So it could be a specific award to a specific college's program that you're applying directly to. So it's not open-ended like the open study award. You still would have to submit an admissions application. So it's very similar to the open study process. However, the affiliation requirements will vary. So it's more common that the affiliation letter isn't necessary. However, getting a letter of acceptance for admission is what they're looking for this one. So that process is going to vary depending on that program's application timeline and requirements for when you would actually end up getting that admissions acceptance, especially because colleges abroad are going to have different timelines than us. And so you do want to think ahead in terms of when would you have to be writing those admissions applications on that college's timeline, because that may be a very different timeline than the Fulbright's application process. So it's nice to have this conversation now, because some of these, especially the graduate funding, some of these awards are going to require you to plan well in advance in terms of having to submit 2 applications. So I'm going to take a moment to navigate the website so you at least have some visual connections to what I'm talking about here. The Fulbright US student program is us.fulbrightonline.org. And some important ways that I would like for you all to know how to navigate this website just to get started is you have the option. You could start at the country level and start in terms of like location. And we're going to do Germany. Germany is a pretty common application country for READ and it's a pretty big program. So it hits all the major buckets of what I'm talking about today. When you at least start at the country level, you can go to that country and you'll see these numbers here are how many awards are available under the award type. So there's 140 English teaching assistantships that Fulbright is offering. If we're considering doing an ETA in Germany, you'll see there's a common structure to each one of these countries' award pages, where it tells you the level of degree that's accepted, how long the grant's length is for, and when it's going to start. When I was talking earlier about thinking about, which country you should choose and considering the candidate profile of who they're looking for, those details are included here as well. So if we scroll down, you'll find candidate profile, and that usually breaks down who they're looking for in terms of area of study. So the German ETA is looking for people who have a background in German studies, literature, and history. And there is a German proficiency preference. And then they're also looking for people who are able to promote cultural and democracy exchange between the US and Germany. And then there's always going to be some sort of foreign language proficiency section that'll let you know like what the language requirement is. And then Germany goes as far as to kind of quantify how many years a college level study that would be. For languages and countries that have a hard requirement, a next step in your application would be you would also need to get a foreign language evaluation. And the foreign language evaluation is a form that either a German professor would fill out, and if you can't find like a professor of the language, you could also do someone who speaks the language natively and has at least a bachelor's degree. So if you have questions about that, and that happens to be you, where you have a country that has a required language level, you're welcome to check in with CLBR and we can discuss plans for who could write your foreign language evaluation. If you have a country that has a preference for that language level, I would still recommend you get a foreign language evaluation. This is partly because it helps the evaluators quantify your language experience, even if it's not required. It's another piece of evidence of the culture, like the language and cultural background you may have in that country. For placement, like I mentioned, the country is going to place you in a location and program or institution. So German being one of the bigger Fulbright countries, you can see it has all levels. And is going to place you in all locations and class types. So if you're applying to somewhere like Germany, you would want to be very open to the fact that you could be doing English teaching in a lot of different settings. And a strong applicant would be able to acknowledge that in their application and their preparedness to be flexible in where they're placed. And then Germany also quantifies the number of hours, which is nice. Not all of the countries do. And they also provide description on, what exactly you'll be doing. And then the supplementary project, you can see here, optional, and then a little bit of detail about, what they mean in terms of like what they would like for you to be doing. Some countries, like I mentioned, are very, very specific about what exactly they would allow you to do. Other countries are going to put it optional, but of course in the application, I would still suggest you plan to do a supplementary project in terms of designing a competitive application, even if it is optional. And so I'm going to pause here for a second and see, does anyone have any questions so far?
Can you apply to multiple countries at once? Or is it like I'm a little confused about that, if you could just explain that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You're only able to apply to one country's program per year. So you can only do like one country, and then within the different like awards that that country may offer, you can only choose one award. And then question in the chat, do you need to know a foreign language to apply to the Fulbright? No, there are countries that actually don't have like a foreign language requirement, even if that country doesn't like predominantly speak English. And I'm trying to think of examples of countries that like, so I guess, yes, there are countries that definitely like don't have a language requirement at all, but like if you knew the language or had some background in it, that would be an advantage. There are also English speaking countries where you could apply for Fulbright funding. For example, like Australia, obviously doesn't have like English teaching, but they do have like some graduate and I think research funding. And I think there are a couple other countries that I know students have applied to in the past because they are English speaking countries and they don't have any like second language. So there are definitely ways. There's, I think also, I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to think of if there's a way to search for that, but there's a couple ways that you can start to identify languages that would be a good fit for you. And they just created this web page. So if you're on Fulbright's homepage, you hover over applicants and then award search, it'll bring you to this. And you can actually filter for that. So hopefully that answers your question. Are there any other questions?
Oh yeah, so like you said that the application opens in April. Is
Mhm.
that for like the following year? Like if yeah, like like if I'm a junior right now and I were to want to do Fulbright like for my like once I graduated, like when do you apply?
Yes, that's a good question. And sometimes Fulbright's like this, it's such a huge award that it's almost operating year round. For example, the current seniors who applied during this award cycle are still in the cycle, and they won't find out until like sometime between now and June of whether or not they got awarded to do their Fulbright the summer after graduation. So the April deadline or the April application that's going to be opening will be for you to do the thing you're applying to do in the 24-25 academic year. So it's all going to be something you would do the following fall of the application cycle you're applying inside of. So if you're a junior now and the application opens in April, you would be submitting your documents for the final deadline October, so fall semester of your senior year. And you wouldn't find out, like if you were awarded, you wouldn't find out until sometime near the end of spring semester or just after graduation of that spring. And then you would depart to go do your Fulbright the following fall. So it's a long-term process, especially if you're starting now. This is something you're going to be thinking about for a while. After you submit in October of your senior year, you won't hear back about Fulbright for a while, though. They'll review applications, they'll select finalists usually in like January. And then if you're selected as a finalist, you won't hear back about whether you were selected until sometime between March and May. Hopefully that kind of like outlines the timeline a little bit more. And then do you have approximate acceptance rate data for these programs? Are some countries easier to get a scholarship in than others? Yes. Actually, I do have that. So Fulbright is one of the few national awards that is actually like very transparent about the number of applicants they get to the number of people that get awarded. And I do really like that. If you're on the website, so let's go back to the main page and you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's this teeny tiny link, statistics, down here in the top or the bottom right-hand corner. And I also have had applicants apply according to the statistics, especially if you're looking at multiple countries. It's kind of nice to use this as a reference. So like, let's say you want to look at just East Asian Pacific countries. And you also know you want to do ETA. That data is available and it usually provides 3 years worth of information. So you can see the total number of applicants to the total available awards for the last 3 years. Because we're still in the 23-24 application cycle, that data probably won't be available for a little while, but it is nice to see that you could compare how competitive certain countries are to others. Like the 22-23 school year for Cambodia, you had a 50% chance of getting funded compared to Laos. So, and compared to Indonesia. And so, yeah, this data is available. It is super helpful. And I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the data, especially because there are going to be years, like I think Laos was an example, or maybe no, it was Indonesia here, where you can see like there were 95 applicants for 0 awards. I'm not exactly sure. Sorry. I'm not exactly sure what this means in the context. It could be that, especially the 21-22 school year, we were like smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. So it could be that awards and their programs got canceled, which is very possible. And so if you're seeing this data here, like try not to like put too much emphasis on it. But yeah, that statistical information is available. All right, I'm gonna hop back over here to PDF. All right. And then, cool, I'm glad. So I mentioned we were going to do just a really brief advising activity. I'm not going to make you all do like breakout rooms or anything because the breakout rooms are awful. However, I do want you all to start kind of brainstorming now that you have the website. And you can use that little search function if you want to get started there or start with a certain country. But think a little bit about like any country you have in mind. And if you have multiple countries in mind, that's totally okay too. And or do you have an idea about at least like which type of award you would like to apply to? And I'm going to hop back over to the website really quick. In terms of if you want to get started with like, I'm not sure which country, but I know which award. Like I know I want to do an ETA, I just don't know where. Under the applicant dropdown, you can look at types of awards, and then it'll do a flyout. And let's say we're just going to stick with ETA, I guess, for the whole thing, because that's where I'm at right now. ETA, and then it'll break it down according to the major country areas. And then it provides these nice tables. So you can look at each country, how many awards are available, the placement type, language requirements, a little bit of information about the teaching commitment, if it's available, and placement. It's a pretty, I mean, these are just like walls of text. So there's not like a nice, neat way. But this is a good place to get started. If you just kind of want a quick overview of all of the different like specs of each ETA. And then I believe it does it for the open study research as well. Yep. Where it'll list the country and a link to that country, open study or graduate degree. And then and it also is nice because, like I mentioned earlier, some of the countries have named awards for certain programs within a certain university. And this section provides a list of all of those according to the country they're in. So this is a good way to get started. Again, that's under applicants, types of awards, and then one of the flyouts here. Otherwise, you can use the award search feature too. So I'm going to give you all just like a couple minutes to kind of poke around. And then what we'll do is take some time to just do like some quick mock advising. So if someone is feeling brave and would like to share, I'd love to discuss. So you all have a chance to hear a little bit about the types of questions I would ask in an advising appointment. But while you're looking at the different country or award decisions, keep in mind, when selecting a country, you want to think about countries that you would have a strong or plausible reason to go to. So I would never recommend that you choose a country because you want to go to somewhere based on like destination or tourist interests. And that's a hard line to walk because you obviously want to be excited about where you're going. But you want to also have reasons that are either connected to academic or professional goals for like why experiencing that country and its culture are going to be valuable, and also what you have to contribute or what you hope to contribute to that country in terms of your background. And then for the award decision, consider what awards your potential country offers. So make sure to pay attention that like not all of the countries are going to offer the same awards. Use the statistics page and consider the affiliation requirements. So again, if you're looking at doing an open study or the open research grant, what are the affiliation requirements? Does the affiliation have to be done by the deadline? Can it be done after the deadline? Is it a hard or soft requirement? Because that's going to really take up some time. Okay, so I'm gonna mute myself for a little bit and give you all just like, I don't know, till 12:40, so 3 or 4 minutes just to like poke around. And then we'll check back in and see if anyone has any questions and do some quick mock advising. Okay, it's 12:40. So can someone share the country they were considering or potentially the award they were considering? And just any thoughts about what you've read about that award or country's page so far?
I just had a quick question actually about the award. I was looking at the page for Russia, and everything right now it says that their program is paused, and I was wondering, is it like kind of a lost cause to apply for like 24, 25, or what do you think?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, the Fulbright is funded through the US Department of State. It's administered under an organization called IIE, but at the end of the day, the decision, I would guess, for Russia to be paused is due to international conflict. We'll see if the 24-25 cycle is open. Some of the countries are paused oftentimes because of the travel advisory warnings as well. So if you see a country that's not available for the year, it often goes on the travel advisory warnings that are going on. So that could change by the time the application process opens. It's a hard call. I don't know.
And then also for some of the countries, they have like dual citizenship eligibility. How does that like work, I guess?
Yeah, so if we go back to the website really quick, and we go to eligibility, here we go. The eligibility requirements here are going to be pretty broad. But here we go. each country is going to have like a different requirement around like dual citizen eligibility. However, like if you are a permanent resident, you just aren't eligible. But paying attention, if it is dual eligible, that's great. And then you also want to pay attention though to like how much time you have spent in that country prior to applying, because there is a limit to how much time you have been allowed to be in the country to be eligible to apply to that country. So let's see here. I'm just scrolling. Here we go. More than 6 months, not counting undergraduate study abroad, are preferred. And then, yeah, most candidates who have had an extensive previous foreign experience in the country are at a competitive disadvantage. And then ineligibility, sorry, these are just walls of text. Applicants who have resided abroad for 5 or more consecutive years in the 6-year period preceding the national application deadline would be ineligible. So there are some quantifiable ways, if you are a dual citizen and you spent time in that country, to like check whether or not you are still eligible to select that country. If this is the case where you think you might be ineligible for that particular country, my advising recommendation would be to pick a country that is adjacent or similar in terms of like language background or cultural background. So if you're still trying to look for a country that you would have like a good match or like competitive fit, there are other countries that we could look into. Hopefully that answers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So back to the advising. Does anyone have a country that they found that they would, that they might consider applying to in the future?
Yeah, sure. There's a program right now that I'm looking at in Peru for like working at private high schools alongside like overachieving math students
Okay.
while simultaneously conducting research. And that sounds pretty cool.
Nice. Could you drop the link to that program in the chat?
I mean, it's going on this year, so I couldn't do it probably, but
No, but just like for an example, I'd like to be able to see the program. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds very specific. Oh,
is this teacher exchanges, so it's not the same thing.
Math for student achievement, sharing ID. I mean, this is just a different extension of Fulbright for teaching. And no, I mean, I'm glad you pointed this out, because I have had students start on the wrong Fulbright, because there are Fulbrights for professors, for teachers, for administrators like myself. And so you do want to keep in mind that like you can get on the wrong web page, but distinguished awards in teaching for short-term program. Website. I'm just gonna see. I mean, like maybe you are. That would be cool. So I don't know. Let's see. You may have to already be a math teacher.
That tracks.
To be
Sorry
for this. No, it's
found
okay.
something.
I'm glad you asked. Cool. However, is it Peru that's interesting, or is it the math teaching that caught your attention?
I would like to do something in South or Central America.
Okay. Let's, oh, wrong one. Hold on.
It's under Western Hemisphere for some reason.
Yeah, it's so fun when I feel like every time I go to that section, it's like a geography test for me. I'm just going to use Peru as an example though, and see. Let's see. So for Peru, they have 5 English teaching assistantships. And ETAs will do 10 hours a week of a socially oriented supplementary project on top of their teaching for 20 to 25 hours a week. So that's significantly more than the German ETA. And Peru also has quantified their expectations for how much time the supplementary project. So you can see the difference in how they start to like describe what they're looking for in ETAs. Candidate profile, degrees in English, Spanish education, applied linguistics, with some experience teaching or tutoring preferred. So Peru's standards are, I would say, a lot more clear than Germany in terms of like the extent of experience they expect you to have coming into this program, the amount of hours you'll be working. They expect you to have experience with like teaching and course pedagogy. And so I'm glad because talking about this country compared to Germany, this is going to be higher level in terms of like probably leaning toward people who are planning to go into some form of teaching, whereas Germany, that isn't a requirement. And then there is going to be, advanced language requirement. So you would have to get that foreign language evaluation by a Spanish instructor. And then it's at a university setting. So their teaching level is much higher than Germany's, which is, all levels. And so you can see that some of the countries have really clear specifications of like what exactly they're looking for in people, whereas other countries leave it intentionally broad to capture a larger applicant pool. Germany's supplementary project was optional. This one is required and has quite a bit more detail about exactly what they're looking for. And so another part of this, if you want to kind of continue to do additional exploration, most of the countries have additional links at the bottom to help you kind of get started. But the biggest part would be planning into that foreign language evaluation and making sure you have somebody who has the time to provide that with you. The foreign language evaluation form is under, if you are looking at the applicant fly down, application components, and then you go to the award you're considering. It has a nice kind of breakdown of the application in these flyout boxes. So you can see details about the different essays that are required, how long they are, and what they're looking for. The foreign language evaluation form, it talks a little bit about what it is and has a link for what you provide to your foreign language evaluator. And then if you want to take a look at the form, it's pretty brief. It's oh my God, this is so blurry. So it's really like the evaluator's information. How long have you known the student for? Deadline about when it's due. The rubric for like how they should evaluate you. And then the evaluator will provide, just like in these drop-down menus, the extent to which you meet the language requirements, and then briefly like an overview of like your skill level and then a signature. So it is, the form itself is pretty short. And in the past, evaluators may want to do this differently depending on how they may want to just like have a conversation with you to confirm your language abilities. So that in terms of how they evaluate you is a little bit more open-ended. So you do want to schedule some time probably to chat with them and plan into that.
Who do I contact at Reed to coordinate a like language proficiency test?
Sure, it could be any one of our Spanish language faculty.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. But yeah, like if you were to select Peru and the ETA program there, in an advising program, my goal is to be devil's advocate to you in asking you questions that are going to help me understand your motivations behind a country and your experience, so we can plan into the narrative you would write for your essays and how to best like organize information and communicate, your background, also helping you to kind of dig into depending on what that country is looking for. Like Peru is a great example of like, they're really looking for people who have significant teaching experience. They're looking for people who have the high language proficiency. So I would probably challenge applicants in that case to look at, what knowledge do you have of Peru's education system? Especially because the English teaching assistantship in Peru is more intensive and it's going to be more number of hours. What experience do you have in like organizing curriculum? What experience do you have, even if it's tutoring, helping students understand concepts and moving them through different educational milestones? And then I would also probably recommend that an applicant starts to research like social customs in the classroom, and be prepared to try and draw connections to your own experience and how you would be prepared to be an ETA in the classroom. And yeah, does anyone have any, oh, let me check the chat here. Okay, got it. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, I'm gonna move it along. So this is a lot of information, but I wanted to go over a little bit about, now that kind of we're starting to familiarize ourselves with just the website and how to find the information you need to get started. The Fulbright's application opens in April for you to do the award during the 24-25 academic year. Students and alumni are eligible to apply internally through Reed's application process. We have a portfolio of awards that have a dual application process. And what that means is that you would submit your application materials to CLBR through an application portal. And our Fellowships and Awards Committee reviews your application. And typically they nominate individuals for certain awards that require a campus nomination. You also have the option to apply at large, which means you would circumvent our application process and apply directly to the Fulbright. This process is usually recommended if you're an alum from Reed who hasn't gone to Reed for like 10 years and you don't really have any connection to the institution. So it wouldn't really make sense for you to go through our internal process, and you can just apply at large. However, if you are a current student, applying internally is recommended. For the Fulbright, our internal process is not competitive. You're not competing against your peers for a nomination. I like to think of it more as a check mark process, in that we are moving you through the application process based on checkpoints and deadlines. If everyone meets all of these deadlines and checkpoints, everyone gets nominated. So it's really there to give you structure and timelines in designing your applications. For our last school year, so I'm just going to use the deadlines from last year. We had 2 internal deadlines. One was August 3rd, and the second was September 7th. And the process is, again, designed to just move you through the application steps and help give you some structure, so you're not like pressed for time by the national deadline, which is usually in October, to try and get all of your materials ready. And usually what I recommend is students begin planning into this process in like June or July. So this conversation today is not to make you feel like you have to start Fulbright tomorrow. We can definitely continue to talk about it, but as you can see, all of the information on their website is still for this last school year, so there's not too much to get started on. usually what I'm doing through the summer is working with applicants so they can prepare for the application process. So the August 3rd deadline is, it's pretty limited. We made it easy on purpose, in that for the August 3rd deadline, we are going to require applicants to log on to the application system, create an account, register in the system, provide that initial demographic and biographic information. And in the application system, it will have a section under institution where you will select Reed College as your selected school. And that's going to be under the country and award page. When you do that, I can then see you on the back end of the application system. So as an administrator for the program, I can see all of our Reed applicants, but I can't see that until you select Reed as your institution. So that's one point to the August 3rd deadline. We also are going to require you to identify the country of choice and award type in the application. So this is not at all to scare you. Like if you change your mind after the August 3rd deadline, like you're not in trouble. This is us just trying to get you to start to make some decisions about what country and award you would like to apply to. However, I have had students change their mind during the process, so that's okay. And then by August 3rd, we will want drafts of your main essays, which is the statement of grant purpose. The statement of grant purpose is more like a cover letter, the way I think about it. It's really meant for you to explain and demonstrate your qualifications and skill set for the thing you're applying to. And then you'll also have to provide us with a draft of your personal statement. Neither of those drafts are like there for us to decide whether or not you're a strong candidate. It's really giving us a point of reference so we can see how much have you got done, how much do you know so far about the award? Are there any red flags? It's also going to give us some context when we're advising you, so we know a little bit about how you're talking about yourself and how you're presenting your experiences. And then for the September 7th checkpoint, that's going to be a little bit more involved. By that point, you should have done all the steps for August 3rd that I've described. And then during that checkpoint, CLBR is going to require that you have made an appointment with us, at least one appointment via handshake between, excuse me, 1 second. Sorry, I haven't had to talk this much in a while. But between the August 3rd and September 7th deadline, we will require that you have made at least one appointment with us. So you'll want to just keep that in mind, that between those 4 weeks, we will have expected to hear from you and have chatted with you about the application. And we'll use the drafts from your statement of purpose and personal statement as a reference in those conversations. We had this step put into the process because we wanted to make sure every applicant had an equal shot at meeting with CLBR and getting insight. And so your applications are further developed and we're able to catch any like red flags in your process before the national deadline. And then we will have expected you to complete the entire application. That includes your transcript, having your recommendations registered, if you have your foreign language evaluation, that would be great. And with your recommenders, I recommend giving them 4 to 6 weeks notice. And that's 4 to 6 weeks prior to August 3rd. So that means we're looking at like mid to late June that you should be thinking about who's going to write for you and initiating those conversations to get them to agree to write for you. And then typically in the past, we've required recommenders to complete their recommendations. However, like by the internal deadlines, I believe for this next year, we won't require your recommenders to complete their letters until the national deadline. So if you're starting to think about who's going to write for you, just kind of keep in the back of your mind that really what we're going to need throughout the internal application process is that they are at least registered in the system and registered as your recommenders. We're not going to require them to have written the letter until the national deadline. And then if you have your letters of affiliation, please attach them. However, we understand that like you may not have them by September. So the September 7th checkpoint is really like, let's get everything together, have all of the like biographic and information, your transcripts, your essays drafted, your recommenders registered, foreign language evaluations and affiliations if possible. You've met with CLBR, and really you have the major blocks of your application complete. So then we can write you a strong campus endorsement because we have the context to do that. And so part of this process by that deadline will be scheduling campus conversations. They're not interviews. However, we will schedule time for applicants to meet with members of our fellowships and awards committee. And the committee is there to chat with you about your application, so they can use that information to write your endorsement. And that happens after the September 7th deadline. After they've written your endorsement, they'll attach that to your application. You will continue working on and polishing your application materials, and then you will submit for the October national deadline. It's typically in mid-October. That was a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions about the internal process? Okay. The details for this are still for this last cycle. So CLBR will likely update everything for this next award cycle in like early June. So what you're going to see on the webpage is out of date, but it's still very similar to like likely what our process will be for this coming year. And you're welcome to use it as a reference. So next steps for you are to continue using the Fulbright website, and then also using the Reed Fellowship site. So if you go to CLBR's main homepage on our Reed site, you can do fellowships and awards and use the flyout, search fellowships and awards, and we have this clunky, beautiful database of awards. And if you type in Fulbright, it'll take you to the US student program. You'll see, like I mentioned, all of the dates are from this last year. But if you click on Fulbright internal application instructions, it's going to have these same bullet point directions that I mentioned, but then also some more details about our September 7th deadline if you're applying for the study research, and then the September 7th deadline if you're applying for ETA. So we tried our best to provide like you with as much context about how to navigate the process just from the website alone. But then also at the bottom of that page, you'll see that we have some recordings from our YouTube page and some links to the Fulbright's website. So if I hop back over there, 1 second. If you go to CLBR's YouTube page, you can see that we have Q&A session. I recorded this during the
BetterHelp gives you access to over
during the pandemic with one of our alumni who did an ETA in Colombia. And this session focuses on talking about his experience as an ETA, his experience with the application process. I'm even wearing the same shirt that I was in that recording. That's funny. But Jolan is there to talk through what was it actually like being an ETA, and how does that differ from like what he expected for the application process. And so that is on our CLBR website. And we also have resources. We did a Q&A with another Fulbright recipient, Meredith, that's there as well. So you can reference that. And then if you are somebody who is new to writing personal statements, competing for national awards. On our YouTube page, we also have pre-recording, it's at the bottom there, building your narrative, part 1 and part 2, where advisors talk through breaking down like how to write a personal statement and what are the different components and how do you plan into the design of your personal statement essays. And so that's a resource that's there for fellowships, grad school, even cover letters. So if you're not sure where to even get started with writing essays like that, we have those recordings there for you. And then finally, one thing that I really do admire about the Fulbright is that they also have for applicants like a whole wealth of recorded info sessions. They have live webinars every year. They have office hours where you can meet with Fulbright administrators. They provide overviews to the program. It looks like they're doing a webinar for the launch of the 24-25 student program that's coming up soon. But from this page, and that's applicants and then info sessions, it'll bring you here. You can look at past events. So let's see here. I think it's this button. Yes, you click on applicants, it'll take you to the recorded webinars. And it has a breakdown of like each section of the application. So you can look at the very bottom, application process, and it'll do a session on the essays, the short essays, finding an affiliation, the components for the study research, the components for the ETA. It also has a ton of other pre-recorded sessions for students. And so I really like this because they provide all of these resources from the past year that you can start to use as a source of research, along with some of the live sessions that they may have. All right, so that again was a lot of information. I recommend, in sitting with this, planning into starting to make appointments with CLBR. Like I mentioned, you don't have to start right now. From my experience, I usually start to see applicants between May and June. And so that's a really good time to check back in with us once the 24-25 application cycle is opened up. But yeah, that's a wrap. Does anyone have any lasting questions before we sign off? Cool. All right. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for giving me your lunchtime to chat through all of this today. Like I mentioned, this will be available on YouTube after I have a chance to just edit it a little bit. You can check back on the CLBR YouTube page if you want to reference this session again.